Shmups, for me, will always be inextricably linked to arcades. Those relentlessly fast-paced 7-stage, designed to kill you for your quarters classics are both what I most love about the genre and what immediately comes to mind when I think of what a shmup is. But I'm fully aware, of course, that those are not the only types of shmup. The Euro shmup, much maligned though it is in certain circles, is also a thing. However, and I want to be clear before I start this review, it's not a thing, in all honesty, I am particularly fond of. So it ought to tell you a lot about Sturmwind Ex, an unapologetically Euro shmup influenced title, that despite what I've just said, I've really enjoyed playing through the game, and I'm looking forward to trying out the harder difficulty and going back to improve my scores. Sturmwind, from German developer Duranik, who supplied this review copy of the game, has undergone a journey of Homeric proportions from conception to release on Switch. Originally planned, I believe, as an Atari Jaguar game, it was finally made available on the Dreamcast in 2013, many years after that system had been discontinued. Despite the handicap of only being available on a dead system, it did actually manage to garner some highly impressive reviews, and I was very eager to check out this latest EX edition and see how it would fare on contemporary consoles. With that praise in the back of my mind, I have to say, after an hour or so of play, I was somewhat disappointed. I really thought I'm not going to like this at all. However, after getting more used to the systems in the game and advancing through the early stages, I came to enjoy it more and more, and despite still being in a subgenre I'm not so fond of, I definitely came to appreciate why some people lavished it with such praise upon its initial release. Now I'm sure, since this is a video review, you have already noticed the most striking thing about Sturmwind are its quite exquisite visuals. I won't bother saying too much about them here since, well, you can see them for yourself, but the only other shmup on Switch I know of that even comes close in terms of graphical polish is Sturmwind Ex, and everything from moving background elements to enemy ships and light effects has the feel of a title with a far higher budget and production value than an indie shmup. It is without a doubt one of the best looking, from a technical standpoint, shmups ever. That polish unfortunately doesn't extend everywhere though, with the intro, menus, game over and game complete screens being somewhat lacking in comparison. The other part of presentation, music and sound, doesn't exhibit quite the same flair either. Not that they're bad, the music in particular improves as you move through the stages, but they're not standout features like the visuals. In terms of gameplay, Sturmwind is, as mentioned, a pretty classic Euro shmup. There are 16 stages in the main game spread across 7 separate worlds, and while replaying the game for score is definitely an option, the main aim is simply to make it to the end and beat the final boss. And this will take you on a first playthrough probably a good couple of hours, which is of course a fairly extensive length for a shmup. There isn't a narrative as such, but the backgrounds and enemies do a good job of silent world building, and moving through the stages most definitely gives a sense of progressing against a consistent insectoid alien foe, although there is also the occasional bit of jollity injected through some light-hearted Easter eggs often found in stage backgrounds. I mentioned earlier that it took me a while to get into Sturmwind, and part of the reason for that is the game has rather a lot of mechanics to juggle, and this is most definitely not a game of the face forward and blast everything variety, using as it does almost every button available. To start with, you have 3 shot types. One button fires your regular shot, and one can be held down to power up a charge attack. You also have a very powerful screen clearing nuke, but counterbalancing its power, these nukes are very rare and hard to come by. These 3 actions, as you'd imagine, are mapped to the face buttons, and we'll come to the 4th button later. You also use the shoulder buttons, with R being used to cycle through your weapons and L being used to switch direction of fire. So already we have a lot going on, but there is more. Certain enemies drop pickups, and while these always start as 1000-point bonuses, shooting them will cycle them through upgrades for each of your weapon types. Collect these when using the matching weapon, and you can upgrade your weapon through 2 higher stages of power. Collect the wrong type though, and you will hear a wrong answer style buzzer and receive nothing. This is where our 4th face button comes into play, as higher stages of weapons add drones around your ship, and you can use this button to switch their formation. This allows you to, for example, have your drones firing backwards while your main shot fires forwards, or vice versa, or have everything concentrated in one direction. A further twist to the weapon systems comes when you take a hit. See, getting shot doesn't always cause the loss of a life. Instead, you first lose whatever shot type you had equipped. Only if you lose all three do you then lose your ship entirely. Fortunately, it's easy to get lost weapons back. Simply pick up the appropriately coloured shot pickup to re-equip that weapon. Now, if this all sounds a bit overwhelming at first, be warned, it is. But only at first. After a while you get used to it, and it actually adds some nice strategy to the game, as you have to decide whether to upgrade a weapon or replace one you've lost, as well as prioritise which shots to use, since if you stick to your favourite, most powered up weapon, that's the one you're going to be first to lose, potentially leaving you entering a sticky situation with your less favourite shot types. One other way you may lose one of your shots is by using the charge mechanic. The higher you charge this weapon, the more powerful the eventual blast will be when you do release it, but charging it too much will lead it to overheat and knock out your current shot type. These three shot types are quite different. I won't attempt their German names, but you have a powerful forward green shot, a more wavy blue shot with a slightly wider spread, and most interestingly an orange spread shot, which can be made to fire in all directions around your ship by holding, then releasing, then holding the fire button. These weapons are suited at certain times to some specific situations, but I found this was one aspect the game didn't take advantage of as much as it could have, with the vast majority of the action being just as easily negotiated with one shot as any other. The action in Sturmwind is, as you'd expect, not as relentlessly intense as in an arcade Danmaku. Instead, enemies come in bursts or waves, sometimes with relatively long gaps between them, in which you just drift through the scenery. There's another system in place in this regard, with defeat of an entire wave triggering a wave bonus. Shoot all the letters of the words wave bonus which appear on screen and you'll receive a star. Stars act as multipliers and are the main way to achieve high scores. What exactly constitutes a wave, however, is not very clear. Sometimes I would kill every enemy on screen between two pauses and not get a bonus. Other times I'd shoot something in the middle of an enemy filled screen and be rewarded with the bonus. Best practice, I guess, is just shoot everything you can, and if you do get a bonus, take advantage of it. Enemies, by the way, can and frequently do come from any direction, and the way they do so is for me one of the game's weakest points. Of course, most shmups do require memorization, particularly if you're looking for that elusive 1cc, but even in the most crazily intense bullet patterns, I like to feel that if my reactions were fast enough, if my coordination was robotically error-free enough, it would be possible to make it through on your very first time. This is not the case in Sturmwind. Enemies and particularly bosses come in, and if you're in the wrong position, there's nothing you can do but take a hit. This can even include enemies spawning in the centre areas of the screen right beneath your ship, or bullets coming in from off-screen. There were many occasions when I only realised I'd taken a hit because my weapon changed automatically or the screen went grey. Add to this a sometimes lack of clarity between what environmental elements are in the foreground and in the background, and even which of the foreground elements will harm you, and some very poor colour choices rendering bullets near invisible against certain backdrops, and you can come away feeling frustrated all too often. Of course you will know for next time, but with lengthy stages often containing periods of little action, dying in a cheap or unfair fashion during a boss fight can really sap your motivation to immediately go back to stage start and try again. However, go back I did, and completing the game feels like a decent achievement. 16 stages are not something you're going to go back and run through over and over though, and one thing I was really pleased to find is an arcade mode that strings together 6 stages and the final boss fight, which by the way is one of the game's worst moments, into something you can happily sit down and repeatedly play for score. It's a shame there are no online leaderboards for this, as they'd have really added incentive to keep coming back to this mode. When it comes to summing up, I want to reiterate, this is not really my type of game. Some of the faults I've listed are in some ways just part and parcel of this subgenre. However, the fact I still found the game very enjoyable is testament to how well the developers have put it together, and again, the visuals really deserve a special mention, as they're quite simply spectacular. I'm going to give the game a 7.5 overall, but anyone on the fence, please go by what I've said rather than a simple score. I feel like those of you who do like this style should not hesitate to pick Sturmwind up, and even those of you who don't may well find an enjoyable experience here. So that is all. Let us know if you play this, or if you've had experience of the Dreamcast version, and I'll hopefully see you next time. Cheers.